This here is a problem. And this. Yes, here we are back again. Not fixing rust on this apparently rust-free vehicle. Wonderful. You can't really see anything from the outside, but lurking beneath here are these two holes. And the inside of the floor is pretty scabby too. First job is to remove the door and the wing and this little panel down here so we can better assess the situation. Oh yeah, just lifts off like nothing. It's not feeling like it's just lifting off. Don't do what I did. I figured the hinge pins were seized or whatever, so I spent a pleasant half hour unbolting the hinges from the door frame with a crappy Torx key instead. Oh wow, why is this door so heavy? Turns out these do just lift straight off. I'm just really feeble. That was fun. And then screws. Posi drive screws. Unbelievable. I might have one of those. Let me see. All right. Let's give one a shot. Oh yeah. Let's see. I do have to take that off. There we go. Not too bad. There we go. So, here's the situation. I know we have rust hiding underneath here, in the sill. Thankfully, the rest of the sill looks fine. I knew this was here too. There's an old crappy repair visible from the inside. I didn't realise there was this patch of rust hiding up here. Great. It's going to be fun to try and access this. So, as far as the floor goes, yeah, I'm not worried about this. This is a reinforcing plate for the mudguard attachment point. No doubt we'll have to patch the floor panel underneath it, but that's a very straightforward repair. This type of thing, where the rust is in seams or corners where panels meet, is much more of a hassle to deal with. Okay, so here's the game plan. First, I'm going to cut off the bottom of this pillar, the outside face of it anyway. A little bit like this. And we may as well go all the way up here, in case we need to repair the edge of the floor. And I guess something like this, and then drill out all of the spot welds, so I can remove the bottom of this panel, but reuse it later. And then once we have access to the inside, then I'll cut out most of this panel. And this is the panel with the hole in it. And that'll also give us access to the return panel, which has the larger rust hole in it. Well, it was never going to be good news. Don't worry about these holes under here. That's what we came to fix. What I didn't come to fix is this double skin section of steel which apparently exists in the A-pillar. And as you can see, it's rusted out in between the two layers, like a rust sandwich. So, the plan here is not to get too distracted from the main quest. Obviously I will have to deal with this rusty pillar, but it's not in the way of me fixing the rust in the sills. However, I have to find out how extensive this rust is. I'm assuming that the rust disappears further up the pillar. It's probably only bad around the bottom edge where it's exposed to moisture from the sills and existing rust around the floor edge. Oh no. This is a problem. It's been a few days since I cut this off, and I'm still not sure what I'm going to do about this. For now, I'm going to do nothing about it and keep going with this sill repair. The first job is to remove the lower edge of the inner panel that I've already cut most of the way through. Of course, I didn't realise I was cutting through it in the first place, but now I may as well get rid of it. And it's not ideal to be cutting off the outer shell in pieces either, because I may need to reuse it. But starting out, I didn't realise I was going to need to remove any more than the first piece I cut off. And I should point out that I can see and feel the inside of the pillar from access holes on the interior side, and on the inside this is all fine. So I thought that the pillar was rust free, not realising there was a double skin section. Okay. Anyway, ignoring that problem for now, I'm going to focus on sorting out the holes in the sill. So, as you can see, I'm cutting away pretty much the whole bottom edge of the pillar. I did consider bracing the door opening with some kind of steel brace, but because this bulkhead structure is all in place, I figured it'd be fine and didn't bother. And only now that I'm editing the video, I can see that the opening did collapse slightly. We're talking maybe 0.5 millimeter. So it doesn't matter, but it could have been worse, so I should have put a brace in. But my lucky day, laziness didn't bite me in the butt. Well, unless that 0.5 millimeter proves to be critical, that will be a bad day. Okay, so this is what we're here to fix. This is the original hole, well, and all of this. What's left of this is obviously going to disappear. I thought I'd just show you now so you can see the carnage before it's gone. And now you can see what I mean by a pocket on the inside. So this, I may not have said that. Anyway, this is open to the underside of the vehicle with just a panel over here. So there's this sort of dirt trap pocket in here. On this side it was completely full of crud, hence the hole, hence this being full of crud as well. On the other side is empty and clean. That probably wouldn't have happened if the mud flaps were still attached. Now I'm going to go dig this splinter out of my finger. I love a nice clean hole. I'm not going to leave that in. Okay, I'm about to pump a bunch of this stuff through the sill. Last night off camera, because I was in a hurry to get all the wet part done so it would be dry for the morning, I did flush the sill out with some of this cleaner. It's just a general alkaline cleaner. And I've had the heat gun going in it a little bit last night and a little bit this morning, just to make sure all the seams are completely dry.
Okay, so I'm going to spray this rust converter into the existing sill. Now, a rust converter like this will only convert the top few microns of rust that it comes into contact with. And the bulk of the product is actually a clear latex paint. So what these converters do is bury rust under a hard coating. And yes, the rust that it contacts turns into an inert black oxide, ferric tannate in this case, but that's pretty inconsequential. If you scratch the cured product with a screwdriver, you'll find that everything below the surface is still powdery brown. I don't think there's any significant rust inside the sill, but there is surface rust, and what these converters do well is stick to rust and bare steel. So I'm just using it to paint the inside of the sill, basically. I will be following up with cavity wax. The alternative would have been to skip the rust converter and just use cavity wax. In this case, because I was able to get the sill relatively clean, I decided to put a hard coating in first.
Okay, let's see. Not too bad. I do want some margin in the welds anyway, so we don't have to be super accurate. Okay, I think it's ready to go. From this side, I have pretty good access. I can get the torch in and do the entire top half of the join, no problem. But where it zigzags through and behind the inner piece of the sill, I have to somehow get to that from this side. I don't think this is going to work. Hopefully I can sort of do a reach around and weld up through here like this without having to completely lie underneath the vehicle, because I don't really like lying underneath the vehicle.
I did make life harder for myself than I needed to here. My replacement piece is cut from 1.6mm thick steel.
A little hot, perhaps.
Because I measured the thickness of the existing steel and it is 1.6mm thick, except that I didn't do a very good job of measuring and it's not 1.6mm thick.
Okay, I think that's okay under the circumstances. There is a piece up here I can't really get to, but hopefully I can fill that in from the back. I mean, you know, it's two bits of metal joined together. What do you want from me? I would have just used masking tape for the whole thing, but I've run out of thick stuff. I've only got this thin tape. think this is actually 1.2 millimeters thick, so I'll probably recut this out of thinner sheet. It's a bit hard to measure. I mean, this measures 1.67, but there's crap and stuff all over the back of this, and this just doesn't, this isn't 1.6 millimeters thick. So I'll quickly remake this off camera. Before I do that, I want to get some cavity wax into this crease here. I will be cavity waxing the entire sill when we're finished. Although this is probably going to cause me problems with welding, I really want to get some deep inside this double skinned piece of steel. I'm just going to have to work my way around with the tacks. It's not perfectly held in place yet. So I'll get one in here and then just slowly work around, making sure we keep our even gap. So the most important thing is that the panels are flush. Now let's try that. A little hot. We'll worry about that later.
I'm grinding down this weld. Plastic trim needs to sit flush against the sill, and also I don't like to leave jigsaw puzzle style patches visible, even if they will be covered up. When I grind welds down, I find it easiest to run across the weld with some kind of hard disc, because the rule is that you must not grind into the surrounding sheet metal. So I get the weld down 99% flush, and then lightly run across it with a flap disc. I wouldn't use a flap disc on an exterior panel though, they're a bit vicious. Even if you're careful, they tend to dig in at the end of a stroke or wherever you touch down.
So the next job is to rebuild the inner part of this lower edge. And I'm going to start off with this scabby little corner. Now I wouldn't normally reuse a piece like this, but I want this detail here. That would be pretty hard for me to recreate.
This piece is new, just quickly folded up from a piece of 1.2mm steel. I didn't need to grind all of this weld down. I had in my mind that another piece sits on top of it, so I ground it flush, and that is the case on the sides, but I could have left the rest of it alone. Anyway. And this is what the back of the weld looks like. I'm not showing this as an example of what it should look like, but it is a continuous bead right through the join, which is what you want.
Next, we're going to deal with this situation. What's going on here is this crusty piece of inner stiffening is spot welded to the outer shell of the pillar. I don't think it's separately attached to the rest of the structure. And what's caused this extreme crustiness, I guess, is water coming down from the windscreen and running between the two sheets of steel. So, how am I going to deal with this? Well, option one is to do basically nothing. I could just clean this bottom edge up that I can see, spray some cavity wax up in here, stabilize everything, weld the outer shell back on, and forget about it. Option two is replace the whole pillar, or at least the outer half of it. That would involve removing all of the spot welds that run up the door seam, same on the other side of the pillar, slicing it somewhere up here below the windscreen, and then the tricky part, finding a good replacement one to weld back on. This was my preferred option, but you just can't find good used ones of these that somebody is willing to cut out of a vehicle. Chances are if one of these is in a wrecking yard, it's worse than this. And if it's not worse than this, nobody wants to cut it up. So instead what I'm going to try and do is just remove the outer shell of steel. Leave this in place. That way I'll have enough access to get in here and clean this up properly, weld up any small holes if necessary, without having to dig into this whole area too much. I've marked all the spot welds in yellow, the spot welds that join this outer piece of steel to this inner piece. I don't want to have to drill out all of these spot welds down the side, so I'm going to cut up along this orange line, up to about here somewhere. And on the other side, down here, we'll have to go around this reinforcing bar, but avoiding the spot welds which I've marked in yellow. At least, that's the plan.
I'm being pretty careful here. Firstly, I only want to cut through the outside layer of steel. I don't want to cut into the inner panel. Of course, that's inevitable to some extent. Secondly, I'm going to re-weld this back in, so I don't want to make a mess of the cut line. This is a 1 point something millimeter thick disc, and even that's getting pretty wide for re-welding. For that same reason, I don't want to pry on this piece and twist it up trying to get it off. So hopefully it comes off easily. Okay, so this is as good as it's going to get. I've wire brushed and then doused this with phosphoric acid and repeated that about 5 or 6 times. The black that you can see is a result of the phosphoric acid. Phosphoric acid primarily removes rust because it's corrosive, but a byproduct of using phosphoric acid is that it's also a converter. So what doesn't wash away turns into iron phosphate or ferric phosphate. Exactly the same idea as the commercial rust converter I used in the Sill, except that there's no paint system built in. So you can apply it, wait 10 minutes, rinse it off, and repeat as many times as you want to. And I've done this along with a wire brush in between to the extent that if I scratch the black areas, there's nothing underneath. The next step, I'm going to use some of this Penetrol stuff sprayed into the seams. I don't know if this is going to do anything, but I already have it, so I may as well use it. This is basically WD-40 except a clear coat instead of oil. It sprays and penetrates like WD-40, but after a day or so, completely dries.
So the question is this okay? And I think it is. This pitting is definitely significant, but there's nowhere, even in the worst spots, that I can come close to deflecting the steel with a screwdriver. And I've tried. I've pushed pretty hard in the worst pitting I can find. In theory, I could remove this whole piece and remake it, but that would involve cutting out a lot of the factory spot welds. The panel also continues and is connected to another internal structure up inside here, so that would be compromised slightly. So the point is that this pitting is probably having an insignificant effect on the overall strength of this structure. If I were to cut this all to pieces and re-weld it all, is it going to be any better? And I don't think it would be. So I'm going to leave it as is. So all of this might be okay, but this bottom edge that I cut off earlier definitely is not. It's also rusted on the inside, so this is garbage. By pure luck, the inside of this is not rusted. The rust stops exactly at this line on the inside. So that's pretty good. Look, I'll prove it. Not too bad. Anyway, I've already made up the new piece, so we'll get this welded on. Okay, so I'm at the point of welding this cover back on. You can see I've stitched it back together. Now, I have on both sides already welded the edge closed. First of all, when I cut this piece off, I inevitably scored this inner piece. In most places not at all, in some places a little bit. So welding down the edge sorted that out. Secondly, this was a nasty, smutty thing to weld back together. Because of the two skins of steel and the paint and oil and whatever in between them, this welding was not particularly pleasant. And I wanted to get that out of the way so that when we do the final welding of this piece, it's not so bad. The problem is, how do I stop all of this rusting out next time? Obviously there's some primer on here, but that's more of a token effort. Everywhere I weld is going to be bare steel, and once it starts to rust around these edges, the primer isn't going to last very long. So what I'm going to do is drill a few holes in here, 3, maybe 4, so that I can properly get cavity wax in here. So let's do that.
Okay, I think that looks pretty decent. Not perfect, but good enough. So that's the pillar done, pretty much. Now I'm going to deal with this and this. And I appreciate that this video is getting a little long. However, I think these two repairs are going to be really straightforward, so I'll knock them out now, unless things get complicated.